What is COSHH? COSHH is the law that requires employers to control substances that are hazardous to health. You can prevent or reduce workers' exposure to hazardous substances by finding out what the health hazards are, deciding how to prevent harm to health, risk assessment, providing control measures to reduce harm to health, making sure they are used, keeping all control measures in good working order, providing information, instruction and training for employees and others, providing monitoring and health surveillance in appropriate cases, planning for emergencies. Most businesses use substances, or products that are mixtures of substances. Some processes create substances. These could cause harm to employees, contractors and other people. Sometimes substances are easily recognized as harmful. Common substances such as paint, bleach or dust from natural materials may also be harmful. Substance hazardous to health? COSHH covers. COSHH covers substances that are hazardous to health. Substances can take many forms and include chemicals, products containing chemicals, fumes, dusts, vapors, mists, nanotechnology, gases and asphyxiating gases and biological agents, germs. If the packaging has any of the hazard symbols, then it is classed as a hazardous substance. I'm self-employed. Does COSHH apply to me? If you have employees, you control their work, every part of COSHH applies. What you need to do. Before you start your COSHH assessment, you need to What do you do that involves hazardous substances? How can these cause harm? How can you reduce the risk of harm occurring? Always try to prevent exposure at source. For example, can you avoid using a hazardous substance or use a safer process? Preventing exposure, e.g. using water-based rather than solvent-based products. Applying by brush rather than spraying? Swap an irritant cleaning product for something milder, or using a vacuum cleaner rather than a brush? Can you use a safer form? Can you use a solid rather than liquid to avoid splashes, or a waxy solid instead of a dry powder to avoid dust? If you can't prevent exposure, you need to control it adequately by applying the principles of good control practice. Control is adequate when the risk of harm is as low as is reasonably practicable. This means all control measures are in good working order. Exposures are below the workplace exposure limit, where one exists. Exposure to substances that cause cancer, asthma or genetic damage is reduced to as low a level as possible. COSHH assessment, identifying hazard and assessing risk. You are probably already aware of many risks in your leisure complex. A COSHH assessment concentrates on the hazards and risks from substances in your workplace. Remember that hazards and risks are not limited to substances labeled as hazardous. Monitoring the control of exposure to hazardous substances is important. Monitoring means measuring to show that control is adequate. It has nothing to do with the state of a worker's health. When do you need to monitor? Monitoring is appropriate when you need to show compliance with a workplace exposure limit, or BMGV, biological monitoring guidance value. When you need to show that control equipment or personal protective equipment is working well enough. Monitoring can also indicate the spread of contamination, for example surface wipes. On-screen learning.